One of the more confusing experiences after narcissistic abuse is finally understanding what happened and still not fully trusting yourself afterward. You may be able to see the manipulation more clearly now. You may recognize patterns you couldn't recognize before. You may even feel intellectually certain that the relationship was harmful. And still, when it comes to your own decisions, reactions, timing, perceptions, or instincts, something may continue feeling unsteady. For many survivors, this creates a very particular kind of confusion, because they expected understanding to restore certainty. They assumed that once the fog lifted, self-trust would immediately return with it. But often, that is not how the system works. Understanding what happened and fully trusting yourself again are not the same psychological process. That distinction matters, because many survivors begin quietly judging themselves when awareness does not immediately produce internal steadiness. They start wondering, if I can see it clearly now, why do I still hesitate? Why do I still second-guess myself sometimes? Why doesn't clarity feel more complete than this? And for many people, that can begin feeling discouraging in ways they did not expect. Most people think self-trust is rebuilt through insight alone. Understand the pattern, learn the terminology, recognize the manipulation, see the relationship accurately. And insight does matter. It restores orientation. It reduces confusion. It often interrupts self-blame. But self-trust is not only intellectual. Self-trust is also the nervous system's willingness to let your own perception, reactions, and decisions stand without continual internal cross-examination. That capacity is often affected long before survivors fully realize it. Because over time, many survivors adapted around interpretation, hesitation, and continual self-monitoring. Eventually, those patterns stopped feeling temporary. They became part of the way the system organized around uncertainty. So even after clarity arrives intellectually, the deeper expectation of uncertainty may still remain active for a while underneath it. Not because you failed to understand the relationship correctly, and not because your perception is permanently damaged, but because the system often needs more than explanation before it fully stops organizing around interruption. A person can intellectually recognize manipulation while still not feeling fully safe enough internally to stop second-checking themselves yet. That is part of why recovery can feel slower or less definitive than many survivors expect. This is also why self-trust often returns more quietly than people imagined. Not always through one decisive breakthrough. Not always through sudden certainty, and not always through emotionally dramatic confidence. Sometimes it begins looking more like less immediate self-correction, slightly faster internal recognition, or moments where your reactions no longer require as much internal negotiation before they are allowed to exist. Many survivors assume self-trust returns once doubt disappears. But often, self-trust begins rebuilding while doubt still occasionally exists. That distinction changes the expectation completely. because the goal is not becoming incapable of uncertainty. The goal is gradually restoring enough internal steadiness that uncertainty no longer immediately pulls you away from yourself. And that process usually develops through repetition, pacing, and accumulated internal safety, not through forcing certainty. Self-trust often stabilizes gradually enough that survivors may overlook its early return while it is already quietly forming underneath them. That can make progress difficult to recognize in real time, especially for people whose systems became highly conditioned to monitor instability instead of noticing steadiness. As this becomes clearer, recovery itself can begin feeling less personally confusing. Not necessarily resolved all at once, but more understandable. The continued presence of hesitation does not automatically mean you are back at the beginning, and the absence of total certainty does not automatically mean self-trust is absent. Sometimes the system is already becoming more internally stable before that stability feels fully convincing yet. If you're noticing that understanding what happened did not instantly restore the level of self-trust you expected, I created a 30-day stabilization space as something structured you can step into while you move through this period more steadily, without needing to force certainty or constantly evaluate whether you are doing recovery correctly along the way. The link is in the description below whenever it feels appropriate to explore it. And if you prefer to stay here and continue orienting at your own pace, that is completely valid. Insight can restore understanding before the system fully restores steadiness. Sometimes self-trust begins returning quietly, long before it feels absolute. We'll pause here.